First, I'd like to just welcome all of you for coming out tonight. We really appreciate the support from the community. My name is Alicia Slate. I'm the president of the Syracuse Animal Legal Defense Fund chapter here at the law school. I'm really thrilled to see all of you here defending New York, Bella's bill here in New York. And I'm excited to introduce our guest speakers. Many of them have traveled great distances to be here tonight. So first we have Stephen Wells. He is the executive director of the Animal Legal Defense Fund. He has traveled here from California, where it's sunny. He has committed himself to animal and environmental protection over the years. In addition to his full-time work, he has continued to volunteer his time for local organizations and projects. Steve joined the Animal Legal Defense in 1999, and until 2006, he served Steve founded and served as the director of the Successful Animal Law Program, which provides support and resources to law professionals and law students, members, and pro bono opportunities for attorneys and firms to assist organizations in their mission. Steve has also created highly efficient, passionate, and talented team at the Animal Legal Defense Fund and an environment where egos are out the door and everyone works together for one end, and that's to end the exploitation of suffering of animals. He lives in, as I said, the western woodlands of Sonoma County, California, and he has 2 cats. And next we have Brian Shapiro in the middle there. He is the New York Senior State Director of the Humane Society of the United States. He has over 30 years experience in the field of animal protection. As a former legislator in Ulster County, he chaired the county's environmental committee and board of ethics and was vice chair of the county soil and water conservation district. Brian also served as the executive director of the Ulster County SPCA, where he expanded the agency's spay and neuter, adoption, and humane law enforcement programs. He is a trained veterinarian assistant and lives in the beautiful Catskills Mountain region of New York's Hudson Valley. So he's used to the no sun, I suppose.
Very much so.
And then at the far end there, we have Stephanie Heath with Q's Pit Crew, who will also be, she's joined in this coalition fight for Bella. She is a native Central New Yorker. She now works actually with the Humane Society of the United States as well on the food and nutrition team, which basically is working to offer sustainable foods to large food service or operations. She's also the president and co-founder of Q's Pit Crew, which is an advocacy group and program-based organization that supports both pit bulls and the community as they focus on decreasing animal abuse through education and awareness. They provide training opportunities. They travel to schools around the community and just teach children how to interact with animals, teach people how to be respectful, and just brings awareness to the local community. She has been instrumental in drafting, lobbying, and passing of local bills in support in protecting animal abuse, to include the Animal Abuse Registry here in Onondaga County, as well as Adrian's Law. She also serves on the board for 2 nonprofits, the Friends of Second Chance Canine Adoption Shelter, which is a unique program here, and it works with inmates at Jamesville Correctional Facility by pairing them up with sheltered dogs. And this program was designed to decrease the recidivism rates and also decrease the amount of euthanasia in dogs. So I'd like to welcome everyone here. And with that, let's get started.
I want to thank you as well for coming, and I especially want to thank the Syracuse Law School student chapter and the president. Do we have other members here we can thank? A few are excellent. Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all you're doing here. and for hosting and organizing this. And really appreciate sharing time with Brian Shapiro and Stephanie Heath as well, who will be talking about Bella's bill and other things, I'm sure. If there's one thing that we can impress tonight, I'll talk a little bit about what ALDF does and so forth, but the most important thing that we're trying to impress is the importance of getting Bella's bill passed. This has been a law that needs changing for decades, literally, and there has been a nearly decade-long effort concerted with the bill every year to try and get the law updated. So we'll tell you more about that and why it's important, but that is really the most important message we can convey, because it is going to take a lot of work, and we're going to need all of your help to get that done. The Animal Legal Defense Fund, oops, here we go. There we go. The mission of the Animal Legal Defense Fund is to protect the lives and advance the interests of animals through the legal system. And we have been working that mission for 40 years. This is our 40th anniversary. So we have a lot of experience in working with the legal system on behalf of animals. And our mission is really what makes us unique. Our exclusive focus on the law is unique within the animal protection movement. But of course, it takes lots of people, lots of organizations, and lots of skill sets to get things done. But this means all of our program work, rather than being segregated by, say, types of animals, companion animals, farmed animals, and so forth, we really segregate the work we do in-house by legal approaches to change. So criminal justice, litigation, legislation, that sort of thing. And then within that framework, what we're really trying to do is have an impact on the largest number of animals and the worst forms of suffering. So that's really our sort of bottom line metric. And then there's a lot of strategy that goes in beyond that. And that basic metric, of course, leads us to focus a lot of our time and energy on institutional forms of cruelty that involve large numbers of animals. So puppy mills, for example, in the companion animal world. And of course, factory farming, where 10 billion animals are raised and slaughtered a year in horrific conditions. So that gets a lot of our attention as well. But within, pardon me, I've been speaking for several days straight, and I'm just starting to lose my voice. One of the benefits of using the law is you can create lasting change. So strategically, we're looking for the largest number of animals, the worst kinds of cruelty, but tactically, we can take on cases that we're confident of winning, that may involve companion animals, that may involve captive wildlife, but that can set precedent, create precedent that moves the law forward that we can build on in the future. And that's one of the reasons we're focused on the law. It's also lasting change. Laws can change for sure, and we hope to change laws for the better. But really, when you change laws, you're creating sort of foundational change. And you're creating opportunities not just for the Animal Legal Defense Fund, but for other groups to build on legal precedents and laws. One thing I'm asked quite a bit is how we choose our cases. And that's where we get to the legal approach. So once we strategize and decide what areas of the law we want to change, we determine whether the most effective way to do that is through legislation, filing a lawsuit, working with the criminal justice system for setting animal cruelty precedents in the criminal law. And that's really what drives how we analyze what we do. And that's what led us to Bella's bill here. We work with prosecutors across the country. And when we work with New York prosecutors, we were hearing consistently how frustrated they are that they put a lot of work into cruelty cases. Law enforcement does a lot of work investigating cases, and then to have results that are extremely disappointing in terms of winning justice for animals is very frustrating for them as well. The program we're probably best known, sorry, I'm skipping forward. one of the reasons we're focused on the law, besides the effect we can have in changing it, protecting animals directly, setting precedent, is that the real fundamental problem for animals and protecting animals in our society is that our laws still consider them property, essentially things. So our laws are telling us that an animal is more like this lectern than a living sentient being, which of course goes against all common sense and reason and goes against science. You know, we live in a time now, you know, those kinds of attitudes were set a long time ago. We know through science now that animals essentially feel, experience pain, joy, suffering exactly the same way we do. And so it's unconscionable that our laws are essentially saying their property, essentially saying that their value comes from their utility to us, how we are able to make money from them, how we're able to exploit them. And this really speaks to, when we get to Bella's bill, you'll see how this property paradigm really plays into that, and why we're having frustrations advancing New York's cruelty law. When I think about the property paradigm for animals, and that the net effects of thinking of animals as things, as you know, in the factory farming industry, units of production, for example. And if you ask yourself, how is it that a country that has, you know, 50 states with animal cruelty laws and a nation that by and large considers itself humane, wanting to be humane to animals, how is it that you can take male chicks born to egg-laying hens and toss them into a giant garbage can so that they slowly suffer and die under the weight of their brothers? How is it that they can be tossed directly into shredders? How is it that pigs can be picked up by their back, or piglets can be picked up by their back legs and slammed on the floor to kill them because they're not growing fast enough? I mean, these things are almost impossible to imagine, and they're happening every day in our country, and worst of all, it's considered legal. And that's the result. Those are the kinds of things that happen when you relegate living sentient beings to the status of being property. Our biggest program, and the one that makes me happiest, is our litigation program. No offense to our other programs, it's just very fun to sue animal abusers and beat them. So this is probably the kind of work we do that most people have heard about, and I'm going to quickly talk about a couple of cases that we've had just to give you an idea of our approach. We had mostly familiar with AG-GAG laws. How many are? Raise your hand. Okay, about half. So AG-GAG laws were passed by states wishing to protect the animal agriculture industry from exposure. Over the past 10 years or so, there have been a lot of investigations and whistleblowers coming out with video and photos of exactly how animals are treated on factory farms. The industry's response, rather than clean up their act and treat animals better, has been to try and make it illegal to take photos and video on farms. And many people don't realize just how powerful the ag industry is in this country, both federally and at the state level. And in ag states, they can easily get laws passed that they desire. So there was this wave of laws passed. 9 states passed these AG-GAG laws, which really made it virtually impossible for there to be whistleblowers or, not sure what I did there. Oh, the little wheel makes the slides go forward. What do you know? So 9 states passed AG-GAG laws, and in 2013, ALDF came up with a strategy to challenge the laws through litigation. We filed our first case against the state of Utah in 2013. We quickly filed a lawsuit against the state of Idaho, and we have since sued North Carolina, Iowa, and Kansas since then. And I'm very happy to say that we won our cases against Utah, Idaho, and just 2 weeks ago against the state of Iowa. So, and I'm even happier to say that the good state of Idaho decided to appeal our victory which meant we got a chance to go to the Ninth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals and beat them again, which sets federal precedent that AG-GAG laws are unconstitutional. The lawsuits were based on First Amendment violations of free speech. So that precedent, especially the Ninth Circuit victory, is not only important because it sets a precedent that's going to help the other cases, and we do intend to ultimately sue all 9 states with AG-GAG laws, but it's also put a real chill on states passing additional laws. So we were seeing this wave of AG-GAG laws passing, and since we won the legal victories, that's really gone down. I think there's only 1 state that's passed an AG-GAG law since then, and we're coming for them. Another case, this was a case that really gets to the heart of the property paradigm, because when animals are property, essentially the law is saying they don't have any interests of their own worth considering. Justice is a horse in Oregon. He suffered horrific criminal neglect at the hands of his owners. When he was rescued, he was emaciated, had frostbite, had all kinds of veterinary issues. Before and after pictures, you can see he's doing quite well today. But he suffers from medical conditions that will require veterinary care for the rest of his life. And his owners pleaded guilty to criminal neglect in 2017. And as part of their plea deal, they covered his veterinary costs through that date. So the cost it took to get him to health. He's now living at Oregon Equine Rescue, and they are going to give him a home for the rest of his life because he needs that vet care. We thought it was unfair that Oregon Equine Rescue have to pay for his veterinary care for the rest of his life. We think justice would agree. So we decided to be his lawyers, and we filed a lawsuit on his behalf through a guardian, one of the people at Oregon Equine Rescue. Gwendolyn Vercher is one of his former owners. And what we're seeking is damages. So this is a damages lawsuit seeking the costs to go into a trust for his care for the rest of his life. We lost in the lower court, but that was entirely predictable. This is obviously a pretty bold case, so we figured it would be kicked to the appellate court, but it's one to watch. And what's most important to me about this case is, and it speaks to sort of how we strategize and move the law forward, we filed the case in Oregon because our criminal justice program in 2014 had won a victory working with a very friendly prosecutor who was willing to take a case that involved multiple horses, a cruelty case. And we wanted to make the argument that every horse in that case was an individual victim of a crime. Typically, cruelty cases involve multiple animals are filed as one case of cruelty. The prosecutor was willing, so we argued that, and we won all the way to the state Supreme Court. So it is now established law in Oregon that animals can be individual victims of a crime. Very important precedent. The year before that, Oregon had updated its animal cruelty law, and we were very involved with the legislature in helping to draft updates and so forth. And one of the things we were able to get into Oregon's cruelty law is that animals are sentient. And this is pretty unheard of as well to have that established. So in Oregon statutory law, animals are recognized as sentient. In Oregon case law, it's now established that they can be individual victims of a crime. So when we go to the court and argue on behalf of justice, we're arguing something. It's already established law that victims of a crime can file civil lawsuits against the perpetrator. And we're resting our hat on that, as well as the fact that they're recognized to be sentient. So that's an example of how we build on the law and really look for opportunities, sometimes looking out quite a few years, to build towards recognition that animals are indeed worthy of having recognized interests, rights under the law. This is just some fun facts. Why is it important that we consider animal cruelty crimes seriously and animal cruelty laws seriously? These are just some stats. I love that, of course, 95% of Americans surveyed consider their companion animal a member of the family. Obviously not property. I love as well that more than 2/3 would rather be stranded on a desert island with their companion animal instead of their partner. Not surprising. And 80% of dog owners said it would be a deal breaker if their romantic partner didn't like their pet. I've just kind of sketched out that there are 20% that wouldn't find that a deal breaker. But so obviously that isn't how Americans view animals, at least not companion animals. This is another reason why animal cruelty laws are so important, and another reason why we're concerned about New York's cruelty law and not having changed for so many years. There's a strong link between violence to animals and violence to humans, as well as other kinds of crime. And this is well recognized in the law enforcement world. The National Sheriff's Association calls animal cruelty crimes a window into the home and uses it as an indicator of other potential crimes that may be happening in a household, notably spousal abuse and child abuse. Most of you have probably heard the statistic that, every mass murderer you could probably think of, Bundy, et cetera, got their start torturing animals. Likewise, with the rash of school shootings, it's been shown that the majority, or about half, of school shooters had records of animal abuse. So there's obviously a strong correlation. Animal abusers are 5 times more likely to commit violence to people, 4 times more likely to commit property crimes, and 3 times more likely to commit other kinds of crimes. So law enforcement recognizes the link. Law enforcement recognizes how important cruelty laws are. And I found the statistic that 89% of women in domestic abuse cases reported that their companion animals were threatened, harmed, or killed by their abuser. They are often used as proxies by abusive people, usually men, and harmed in order to cause harm to the spouse. And because of that, there are lots of cases, and I don't know what the statistic is, but there are many. It's well recognized that women will often not leave a home where they're being abused because they fear leaving their animals behind. So it's a real tragedy. So protecting animals well in the law protects people as well. So that brings us to more problems with the mouse. There we go. Oh. So one of the things that we do is we do an annual rankings of all 50 state laws. So last year, Illinois was ranked number 1 for the 5th year in a row. Poor Kentucky was dead last for the, I think, 11th year in a row. Any idea where New York lands? Anybody have a guess?
In the bottom tier. We were dead, almost dead last, in a heat for dead last year. So we raised up a little bit, but still in the bottom.
33rd. Yeah. Yep. So, which is pretty shocking. It's pretty shocking to me, given New Yorkers seem to be very caring about animals. And so moving to Bella's bill, this is the problem we're trying to solve. It's also, this is a relic of how New York's cruelty law is constructed and where it lies. Obviously, at 33rd, there are so many ways that the law could be improved, but improvements have been thwarted for year after year after year. And that's because New York's cruelty law is housed in the agriculture and market section of the law. So it is housed along with such important laws as standards for hay and grapes and cheese, that sort of thing. That's where New York's cruelty law lives. And there's a lot of problems resulting from that. One is maximum penalties are 2 years, no matter how horrific the crime. And law enforcement prosecutors don't get training in ag and markets laws. They get training in the penal code. So we have officers out there charged with enforcing the cruelty laws, and they're not trained. They also carry the penal code with them, not the ag and markets code. So they don't have the laws with them. And that's really important for enforcement. So the punishment clearly doesn't fit the crime. And there's been a number of cases. There was last year there was a case where someone stabbed his girlfriend's cat, I believe 30 times, threw her off a balcony, ran down and stomped her to death. And that individual received 30 days in jail. Ag and markets laws also don't allow for alternative forms of punishment, bans on ownership, psychological counseling, those sorts of things. There are a lot of problems that could be fixed, but because the laws in Ag and Markets Code, changes to the law go through the legislature, through the Agriculture Committee, which has not shown a strong interest in advancing stronger animal protection laws. So the bills tend to go to the Ag Committee and die. So Bella's bill is a solution that we are working on in coalition with lots of groups. As I mentioned, there has been a bill to move the law from Ag and Markets to the Penal Code introduced for many years now that has gone nowhere. We are calling the bill Bella's bill after a dog who was brutally killed on Long Island. Bella was an 11-year-old shepherd mix. Her owner put a zip tie around her neck, stuffed her in a trash bag, took her outside, and beat her with a shovel. And her injuries were so severe, sadly, she had to be euthanized. So in honor of Bella and the 4 months sentence that the perpetrator, crime fully witnessed by neighbors, including children, 4 months was the punishment. And in her honor, we are introducing Bella's bill, along with Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal is our champion on this, who's been fantastic for animals. So these are the basic tenets of Bella's bill. But I want to say the most important element is moving the bill from Ag and Markets to the Penal Code. If we were able to secure nothing else, that would be a huge victory. That alone would increase the maximum potential penalty to 7 years for Class D felony animal abuse. And it would open the door for changes to come. Once it's in the Penal Code, it'll be easy for us to make additional changes down the road and try and get New York's law up out of the mid-30s and hopefully up to number 1 someday. So these are the current, the bill is actually still being amended. So it has a bill number, which is A342, supported by, that's Linda Rosenthal, supported by the Humane Society. And Brian, his expertise in moving laws through the New York legislature is legendary, and he's going to talk to us about how to get this done. And ALDF is a sponsor of the bill this year. A342 is the bill. And we have, the best thing we can ask right now is for you to stay tuned, since the bill is just getting finalized. The legislature right now is completely tied up with the budget. So when they start to move the bill, we want to be able to reach out to you and ask for your help to pass it. Because as Brian will talk about, it's difficult to get bills through the New York legislature for a lot of reasons. One, because there's so many. So to get a bill noticed and get it up above the fray will take a lot of effort, and we're going to have to depend on a lot of grassroots support. So ALDF.org/Bella, you can find information. You can sign up here for our e-newsletter, and we will send updates when the bill moves. There's a Bella's Bill Facebook page. You can look for Bella's Bill on Facebook. And I'm sure Brian via HSUS will be sending out alerts as well. So that's where we're at. I want to bring Brian up so he can talk about how to move laws forward. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. So Steve just informed me that this particular mouse is a left-handed mouse. So I'm right-handed. If there's any lefties in the audience, please avail yourself of this at some point. So my name is Brian Shapiro. I'm the New York State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. It's a pleasure to be here in Syracuse once again. And thank you very much, Steve, for the work that you're doing with ALDF and beyond joining ALDF on this particular issue and legislation, I'll talk a little bit about the importance of joining with other groups and networking and building communities so that way we can advance animal protection. Oh, it does work. Cool. So just a little bit about the Humane Society of the United States. The HSUS, we're the nation's largest animal protection organization. We advocate for better laws to protect animals. So almost all of our states have a state director. At any given point, I can be in Buffalo, I could be in the Bronx. Today, I'm in Syracuse. New York is a large state, and not only are we working on bills at the state level, also at the city level as well. With the help of advocates and, of course, the Q's Pit Crew, we were able to pass Adrian's Law in the city of Syracuse, which is a law that stipulates that an animal cannot be tethered outside in extreme weather, whether it be too cold or too hot. The same law was passed in Utica and a similar law in Buffalo as well. So that's the kind of work that we do to promote better laws to protect animals. We conduct campaigns to reform industries, providing animal rescue, investigating animal cruelty. We're the nation's largest hands-on provider of animals through our sanctuaries. And we are also an important advocate for local humane societies as well. That's our website. If you're not familiar with our website, I urge you, please, to take a look. We have so many different campaigns, whether it's the campaign to shut down the seal hunt, whether it's to advocate better conditions on equine issues, fur issues, wildlife trafficking. I've been with the organization for 7 years. I'm still not done with the website. There's a lot of information, and I urge you to please check it out. On to lobbying. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, how you can be an effective lobbyist for animals. I myself am a registered lobbyist with the state of New York. All that means is that I get to wear a suit and that my organization spends at least $5,000 a year on lobbying. All of you are lobbyists. You are lobbyists whether you are talking at your houses of worship, discussing with people, having dialogues about your passion for animal protection, whether you're students, the SALDF chapter, you're lobbying, you're talking to students, you're holding this forum here today. So that's actually, that's kind of like an archetypal, I guess, a turnoff to say that in order to lobby, to be an effective lobbyist, you need to be special. You got to have a handful of cash. That is not how it is. So don't believe that image. Don't be scared off by lobbyists. Everybody here can be a good, effective lobbyist for animal protection. The way to do that is to meet primarily with your legislature and your representatives. So a lot of people think that if you meet with people, if you meet with your elected representatives, they're going to grill you, they're going to stick a light in your face and ask you where you were on, March the 22nd. That's not how it is. Some of you have heard me speak before on this particular issue, but I have to share it again. The first time that I was speaking in public, this was at a town board meeting in Woodstock, New York. I was scared. I felt the whole left side of my body go numb. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. But when I watched the videotape of it, I was like, I did it right. No one was making fun of me. No one was asking me questions that put me on the spot. And quite often, as we move forward, if you don't know the answer to something, totally cool. Don't make it up. Don't get flustered. You say, you know what, that's a great question. I'm going to call your office and I'll be back in 2 weeks. That way you get to know the name of the staff member. Bang, your foot's in the door. You're able to start that dialogue. Again, weird thing, doesn't happen. That's what happens. Very pleasant, sit down, everyone's nice. They probably have a bowl of hummus there and some coffee to enjoy. Just this nice spread right here. It should go without saying that our elected representatives are here to actually hear what you have to say, whether they agree with you or not. That's their job. And as citizens of the United States of America, your job, our job, is to let elected officials know, whether it's at the town level or at the state level or at the national level, what it is we're feeling, what it is we're interested in. We can't fall into these states of entropy. We have to keep moving and pushing the bar and advancing the cause of animal protection. On that note, before I go on, you know, I shared this yesterday we were in Albany yesterday, Steve?
Yes.
All right, let's kind of forget. You know, I had brought up the fact that while terrible things happen to animals, such as Bella, such as the types of things that Hughes Pitt Cruz sees, that the Animal Alliance of Greater Syracuse sees, that all of us see, we're winning. We are winning. In the American lexicon, you don't have to struggle like, geez, if I say puppy mill, will someone know what I'm talking about? People know what a puppy mill is. People know what a factory farm is. If you say, I'm a vegetarian, no one looks at you like you're out of your mind. It's actually quite normal now, and a lot of people look up to that. So we are empowered, and elected officials are interested in what we have to say. And a lot of them are starting to come around more so than ever before. So, you know, tip of the hat to Linda B. Rosenthal, who is the sponsor, the prime sponsor of Bella's bill, representing Hell's Kitchen in New York City. There was a time when you really didn't have a lot of legislators. There was Frank Padovan and essentially Linda and maybe a couple of others who dabbled in it. Now this is definitely something that our electeds are paying attention to. So hop on that train. All right, this isn't as complicated as it seems. So does everyone remember that Schoolhouse Rock video? It's the same thing. It's essentially the same thing without the cute little song. So you have two houses, just like at the national level. You have the Assembly and you have the Senate. If you take a look at the sign that's right over there, Bella's bill, the number is A342. That's A for Assembly. That's an Assembly bill. We are working on getting a Senate sponsor. And when there is a Senate sponsor, it will be Bill S0074. So as you move forward, and you're all going to be engaged lobbyists, A is for Assembly, S is for Senate. Let us say that on this chart, the blue is the Assembly. Someone comes up with a good idea. Someone approaches a legislator and says, hey, you know, why don't we have a tethering law? Again, just to use that for an example. Why don't we have a meatless Monday, mandated for school districts? So the legislator will write up a bill, usually make sure it goes before legal review to make sure that it's all in order, that it can pass, and then it goes to a committee. Most of the animal protection bills in New York State are either in the Agriculture Committee or in the ENCON Committee, Environmental Conservation, although sometimes you might have it in other areas. Might be in the Education Committee if it's a veterinary issue, or Consumer Affairs, let's say, if we're talking about like a lemon law for pet stores. So it goes to the committee. In the other house, you have to have a bill that's exactly the same language. So we're talking about the A bill, the A for Assembly. The Senate bill has to be exactly the same. Now, legislators, a legislator is a term for either a senator or an assembly member. They are all legislators. They are all different people, such as all of us in this room are different people. We will agree on some things, we'll disagree on some things. Sometimes it's very hard to get two legislators to agree on the exact same thing with the exact same language, and staff have to go through a lot to get everyone on the same page. If you have two different versions, the bill is not going to pass. So the same version has to pass in the committee of both houses. You'll see it says a hearing is held. In New York State, we don't have hearings, which is really strange. Hearings are good things. Hearings are part of the democratic process where you have an opportunity for all sides to come forward and present evidence, to give examples, and to lobby and to try to sway legislators and convince them based on the efficacy of one's argument. We don't have that in New York. So what you really have to do is to be able to hustle a bill and be able to convince legislators with your lobbying skills and at the committee level, and to really network with people. If it passes the committee in each house, that's great. And then it can be referred to the floor for a full vote, a floor in the assembly, a floor vote in the Senate. The governor, off to the yellow. If it passes both houses, the bill is sent to the governor. The governor can sign the bill, or the governor can veto the bill. A veto can be overturned with a 2/3 majority of the houses. That's basically the Reader's Digest version of how a bill becomes a law in New York State. A couple of facts. We have 63 senators and 150 assembly members. We recently had a big change in New York State where the Democrats took control of the Senate. So now there's Democrat control of the Assembly, the Senate, and the governor's seat as well. There's 14,000 pieces of legislation, bills that are introduced each year. Those are a lot of bills. There are some legislators who will say, if you go to a legislator and like, I'm very concerned about fill in the blank, and the legislator says, well, I am too. I am going to introduce a bill, and I'm going to do this for you, and it goes into the ethereal world of the 14,000 bills. Out of those, only 2,000 are acted upon, meaning they might pass one house or pass the committee. It moves. That's a term. It might move. Only roughly 800 are signed into law. So, as Steve pointed out earlier, out of those, I think we're doing pretty good with animal bills. We get them passed, and now as we get more support and we get more animal-friendly legislators, we're going to see more of these bills passed. But we can't do that without citizen lobbyists. We can't do that without folks such as yourself and your friends and your neighbors and your networks getting involved to make this a more humane society for animals. We mentioned the governor has the power to veto, and it can be overridden. There's different types of advocacy. There's peer-to-peer. Those are conversations we might have with each other. They're conversations, as I said earlier, we might have at work. There's protests or boycotts. Now, protests are good. You know, protests are firmly rooted in American history and beyond. But here's the thing. You have to make a shift from being an activist to an advocate. And it's not just semantics, okay? I think it's great to carry a sign. It's where I started. It's where a lot of us started. Highlighting an issue, getting people pumped up. You're concerned about an issue. But what happens then when if you're concerned about a corporate policy, a business policy, and then finally the lawyers or the owner say, yeah, come on in. We want to hear what you have to say. Are you then prepared to be an advocate? Because there's a difference. There's definitely a difference. And you have to have your facts. You have to have your communication skills. You have to be able to have superior communication skills and not get angry and not get frustrated. It's natural to be frustrated, but you don't necessarily have to show that. You know, if you think about what you do if you're, in business or so, you have to be able to present your case. So that's when you reach the point of going from an activist to an advocate. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And of course, community education. This is a school of higher learning to present issues to the community. I know Q's Pit Crew does a lot of community outreach as well, and legislative. When we meet with elected officials, some of this should be common sense, but I've seen bad things. I've seen people say things that's like, are you trying to help your legislation, or are you trying to just bury it in the ground? People will get I think if you're trying to convince someone, if you're trying to convince a representative or someone in an argument, I mean, think about Thanksgiving, you're with people at the table, and you get into your traditional arguments about politics and you get flustered and angry. Save that for your family. Do not show that when you're in an official meeting talking with people. Again, just judging by this audience, it seems like common sense, but you have to be able to have superior communication skills, and that's something that the animals want. The animals who don't have a voice want us to be ambassadors. They want us to be communicators. They want us to advocate for their safety and well-being in the most efficient and effective manner possible. Be honest and show appreciation to the person that you're meeting with. Ask if you can help. Is there any way that I can help you with this? Sometimes you might get right off the bat a positive response. Well, how can I help your office? What do you need? I work with ALDF. I work with the HSUS. What can I do for you? Be conversational. These are people. They are not robots who you're meeting with. And make the ask. And here is the ask. You might meet with a representative and they'll say, this has my full support. When this gets to the floor for a vote, I'm sure to support this. May I ask what's wrong with that? Sir?
Bring it into the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it might not get to the floor without your help. Therefore, we want you to be a co-sponsor. We want you to put your name on this. We want you to, thank you. We want you to sponsor this because it may not get to the floor. And someone can say with false bravado, you've got my support 100%. No, you don't. Because if it doesn't get to the floor, if it doesn't get out of committee, it's not going anywhere. And don't forget to smile. Don't forget to just be natural. People are taking their time to meet with you. And quite often you might meet with a staff member and you'd be like, oh man, I don't want to meet with the staff member. I was very excited to meet with the legislator. Well, who are the people who give the information to the legislators? It's the staff members. Who are the people in 10 years who are going to be the legislators? It's the staff members. Going back to number one, I was with a group of people and I had this one gentleman who started yelling at the staff member. I drove all the way here. I demand to speak to the legislator. And I was like, oh, please don't do this. Please don't do this. And he made a very bad impression. I'm surprised he was not escorted out of the office. I don't want to deal with that. You don't want to deal with that. An elected representative does not want to deal with that as well. So I hope you don't mind. I just share this from personal experience. It's been a very long and strange road. So engaging elected officials, the best thing to do, honestly, is to make a call to your legislator. It's very simple. And especially if you're calling the governor's office, if you call like the governor's line, if a bill passes and it's before the governor's line will simply say, what's your zip code and are you for it or against it? That's it. You might get a little more dialogue if you call either your assembly member or your senator. But again, no one's going to give you a hard time. Again, the most effective thing is to be a human being and to make that call. We have become a lazy nation of Facebook warriors. I am guilty of it as well. Facebook is a very convenient tool. So I don't mean to dismiss when you get an alert that says take action on this from ALDF, HSUS, ASPCA, MFA, other leading organizations. It's important. But unless you follow that up with a phone call or direct contact, you're not doing everything you can to help advance animal protection.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Good. Can you get a green book here upstate like you can in the city? A green book that has all the numbers.
Excellent, excellent. My book, mine's red, so yeah, I know. What you can do is if you do a quick Google search, and you'll see later on, I'm lazy, so I love Google searches. If you do a Google search, who are my representatives? You can find at the city level who your representative is by zip code. If you do like town, usually because of gerrymandering, which is a hot issue right now, not cool. Just got to mention that. If you put your zip code in, it will come right up. And you can also do that with the Assembly website or with the Senate. But if you do something that says, who is my elected official? That's a lazy person's green book right there.
Right, okay.
Does that answer your question?
Like, can I go to, is there a building I can go to here in Syracuse and get a green book?
I think if
I mean, I
Yeah.
call it a green book because that's what color it was when I used it. in
Yeah,
the city,
there,
but-
I think New York City probably has more money and resources to do
okay.
that.
Right, right. I got
When
it.
I made a joke about my red book, I have to buy it. It's small. It's the
Right.
best $30 that I've spent. It's great. It's right there.
So you can buy it here.
You could, yeah. Well, you have to buy that online. The
Oh.
question is, for those who can't hear, the gentleman's talking about an easy guide to who your elected representatives are. Honestly, I think the best thing to do is to look it up electronically.
Okay. Well, in the city, you can go to the mayor's office and get a green book,
hmm
and it just has the numbers for every state, federal, everybody.
The challenge with that is, for instance, my red book. It's March now. It hasn't even come out yet because we've had so many different changes in the representatives. By the time something like that is in print, if it's online, it's just done so much faster.
Right.
So another thing to do, thank you for your question, is to write to your legislator after you find the name in the green book or the red book,
Yeah.
and to email them. I don't know why fax is up there. I have no idea. And I'm suddenly having a flashback to that horrible, smelly fax paper that used to be on the roll. Or snail mail. I will say that mail is very effective, and some of you have heard me say this before. If you're going to write a letter, like I was a local representative in Ulster County for 13 years, and if I got a handwritten letter, that was really cool. That was like right on my desk. Someone took the time to write a letter to me, and I'm going to pay attention to that. So, and I don't know if people are still taught cursive. If you know how to do cursive, that's pretty cool. And if you use a pencil, extra credit as well. Letters to the editor. I love letters to the editor because they can have a life of their own. Not only, and newspapers like this, they have to put something in the last 2 pages of the newspaper. The cool thing about letters to the editor, it gives you a forum. Unless it's really out there Ted Kaczynski style, they probably will print your letters to the editor. And then you can get them, they have them online, and then you can share it and share it with others. Back to the idea of community advocacy. You're taking information and sharing it with others. So I do strongly recommend letters to the editor on pointed issues or just on wider issues as well. It does create a public dialogue. Attend public meetings and ask questions relating to animal issues. So whether you're meeting, you can always set up a meeting. We just had a meeting with the chief of police, a number of us here to talk about the different work that the animal groups are doing. You could meet with an individual representative. You can go to a public hearing. And once again, when you go to these things, make the ask, be very clear, be respectful, don't yell, don't get yourself goaded. Especially as I said before, we're winning, but there are people who like to needle us and who make just silly jokes. That's all they are. They're just silly jokes. And they're very upset that we are advancing our cause in such an effective and professional manner. Have personal meetings with legislators. The legislative session for New York State runs from January to June, sometimes a little bit over if the budget goes over, and it does look like, sadly, perhaps this year the budget will go over. But in the summertime, they're usually in the district offices. So most of your state representatives will have an Albany office or they'll have a local district office. Personally, I think it's more effective to go to the local district office because that just shows you're a constituent, you're right here, you're in the neighborhood, and they can make that connection. And plus, you don't have to drive all the way to Albany. And do respond to the action alerts. Again, Facebook and social media is a tool. It's not the end-all, be-all. We're not going to win just by sitting in our computers. And say thank you. I will say this. you can have legislators, let's say Assembly Member Rosenthal, who continually puts at the forefront animal-related bills. You might have others who don't do that, and maybe one time, and they're from the opposite party, let's say you're a Republican and it's a Democrat, and they do something good, you can write and say, you know what, I disagree with a lot of your positions. I actually, as long as you're respectful, I've never really agreed with you before, but I am so pleased with what you have done. And that's the kind of thing that will make a difference, that someone will pay attention to. So do say thank you. And it's just basic stuff. If someone does something good, thank them for it. It's just basic decency, and it's an investment in furthering our cause. Briefly, I want to go over, and this is just a partial list. This is just for New York State work that HSUS has done. We would not have been able to pass any of these without effective citizen lobbyists. Companion Animal Capital Fund, getting $5 million into the budget to help our animal shelters with matching grants so they can do capital improvement projects. Strengthening pet dealer regulations. Again, hats off to Linda Rosenthal. Research Animal Retirement Act, helping research animals. Strengthening animal fighting laws. Wild animals in circuses. New York City, bang, no more wild animals in circuses. We did this at the state level, the Elephant Protection Act. No more elephants in circuses. This is not the 1800s. It's not funny. It's not funny to see a tiger jump through a flaming hoop. That's crazy. That's not cool. It's not entertainment. So we're working on a bill now to extend this to all animals, and I do think it's favorable, and I do think it'll pass. We passed laws banning the sale of shark fins, which is having such a terrible impact on our shark populations as an apex species. Banning the sale of most ivory products in New York State. Sometimes it could take years to get a good law done. One session, we got that done. I still don't know how we did that, but that was a good bill. And then there's bills that you try to stop. Someone had the brilliant idea to spear and club snapping turtles. I have no idea what would move someone to want to club a snapping turtle. We're able to stop it. It's back again, but I'm sure we will be able to defeat it. A hunting season for mourning doves. And a really good one where we defeated 2 years in a row, to take the definition of a working farm dog and to redefine the farm dog as a crop or livestock product. Reason being, a crop or a livestock product does not have to fall under anti-cruelty statutes. A dog is a dog is not an onion. Maintaining the ban on snare traps, that bill has come up again. Each year we knock that down a little bit more. Last year we kept it from even getting a vote in the ENCON committee of both houses. We want to do that again. Prohibited pet leasing, and of course I mentioned earlier the tethering laws which we were working on. Our priorities in New York State, we have up here banning the sale of dogs, cats, and rabbits in pet stores. Remember I said we're winning for the third time? We have reached that point where that's not pie in the sky. The federal government is not following through on its monitoring of the USDA. Conditions in pet stores are substandard. The only reason that those animals are there is to make a buck for the owners. It's not like in a shelter. In a shelter, everyone's there for the best safety and care of the animal. And you know what? If you really want a purebred boxer, you can go to a breeder. A brick and mortar pet store is not, that's just part of the past. So that's one we're working on. Wildlife trafficking, I mentioned circus, funding our shelters, getting our cruelty laws in the penal code, which is what we're discussing today, and so many others. In New York City, we're actually working on a foie gras ban, a ban on the sale of foie gras. And by working with the New York State DEC, I've been able to get probably 250 to 300 turkeys on Staten Island to an upstate sanctuary that otherwise would have been killed, which is a great segue to partnering. That is a really cute picture. I had to look at it. I was like, was that photoshopped? But no, that's for real. I'll give you as an example. With the DEC, quite often, the Department of Environmental Conservation may have different views than the HSUS. But where could we work together? And that was an example where we could work together. And if it wasn't for the New York State DEC, we never would have been able to pass the shark fin ban. Find common ground. I mean, so often, especially as animal groups are always fighting because we're emotion-based. Why are we fighting? What do we have in common? Not what do we have, what are the differences? What do we have in common? The animals don't want us arguing and bickering over nonsense. Find common ground and work with each other. And I'm very pleased to be working with ALDF on this and other issues as well. Again, my lazy Google reference, if you want to find out more, just Google HSUS email sign-up form so you can get the latest information on our national and state campaigns with HSUS. Wrapping it up here, that's a group of lobbyists again, for Humane Lobby Day in Albany. That's our second largest one. I actually found the next year there was even more. So that's about 300 people. Wow, that's impressive, right? That's the well of the Legislative Office building. Really cool. But when the Sportsmen's Federation come out, they are falling off the rafters. They are everywhere. That's a lot of people. Now, I'm not passing any judgment on what their issues are. Oops, yeah. Or, oops, no, I can't go backwards. Steve, I fell into your trap. So there's no comment on what the issues are, but we have more people than that. We have more people than that in that last slide. But why aren't we, it's a rhetorical question. Why aren't we showing up in numbers like that? I guess those folks, they're very committed. They're afraid their guns are going to be taken away. Are we concerned that conditions for animals are going to be lessened any more than they are afraid of their constitutional rights to bear arms? We need to step up and we need to be involved and to be those lobbyists. And that is me. And that's my email address. Please feel free to reach out to me. That's first initial, last name at humanesociety.org. And that's my wonderful friend, Little Pistachios. I want to thank you for your time. Gulliver the Pit Bull, thanks you very much. As well as my good friend Franklin, who's my office assistant, who likes to watch me work. With that said, Steve, shall I bring up Stephanie? Stephanie would like to come up? Thank you. Thank you very much. And I want to thank Stephanie and Q's Pit Crew. HSUS has enjoyed a solid relationship with Q's Pit Crew for many years. And I look forward to many more years of working with the organization.
Thank you, Ryan. Likewise. And it's this one here. My gosh, so much going on up here. Okay, good thing I didn't go to law school. This is a lot. So I just wanted to say thank you, Brian, for your words, and Steve and the whole ALDF team, and Alicia and everybody for setting this up. This has been quite the support, and love seeing this room full of lobbyists, whether you're one now or about to be one, that's for sure. So what I'm going to do right now is just take the time to talk a little bit about our work at Q's Pit Crew, and then I'm going to move into a few cruelty cases that have happened here in the last few years. Just to kind of give an overview, I will say we'll get to the slide where graphic photos will be shown, so whether you choose to look or not, you'll just have a fair warning. So Q's Pit Crew. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We are founded actually under the umbrella of Animal Alliance of Greater Syracuse back around 2011. And we, just to tell you a quick story, I worked at a local shelter here, a rural shelter in Madison County. And I remember I was getting my master's degree, and I was going to work there part-time while I was getting my master's degree. And I remember walking in there like rainbows and butterflies. Like, this was going to be the greatest thing in the world. I'm working for an animal shelter. I'm doing my passion. And I quickly learned that it's not all rainbows and butterflies. And it was really, really challenging initially to see what was happening to these animals as they were coming through our doors. And it was around that time that I was really going, where do I fit in here? What can I do to make a difference? Because I saw so many dogs coming through the doors that had the big blockheads and that were low to the ground. And they were, your pit bull-like dog. And they were the ones that were coming in starved, beaten, that was the majority of what we were seeing, right? And I couldn't wrap my head around it. So I started getting more involved, attending conferences, reaching out to HSUS, and doing everything I could to learn as much as I could about the plight of these animals. And learning that about 2,300 pit bulls, our pit bull type dogs, are euthanized on a daily basis across our country was one motivator for my sister and I to found Q's Pit Crew. So what we decided we were going to do was we weren't going to become a rescue, because we knew that that wasn't necessarily our way to get to the root of everything, right? We need rescues and we need shelters, absolutely, but we felt like we needed to start to decrease the numbers of that 2,300, right? We also needed to see the adoptions go up. And we also wanted to work with the community to do that. So how we do that is by offering humane education to schools here in the central New York area, working with community centers and other public service agencies. We facilitate political action through that will strengthen laws to protect dogs, partnering with Syracuse-based agencies that care for the city's homeless animals or homeless dogs by providing volunteer and other professional support services to increase dog adoption. And also, when available, providing other types of animal welfare services. So this was a news article on Syracuse.com. I remember exactly when this writer, Tim Canales, had wrote this, February 7th, 2013. And I asked, I wanted to find a journalist that was willing to put really hard numbers in front of the public so that the community really knew what was happening. And Tim was willing to write this article. And when we looked at the numbers from 2012, just in the city of Syracuse, the number of dogs that came into the shelter was 913. And the number of dogs that were euthanized was 573. And that really, really just, that riled a lot of people up. And I was hoping that it would. We needed people to see that number, right? 573 dogs, more than half of the dogs that walked in the front door went out the back door, right? So we also knew that those were not dogs that were all aggressive or all sick. That most of those dogs probably were healthy, what may be deemed adoptable dogs. So we needed to change that. Here are a few more numbers. So this slide here, or the picture here, you're going to see on this graphic, that number I mentioned, 2012, you can look at the intake of 910 dogs, and below was the 573 euthanasia. And let's just jump to 2016. Dog intake was 677, so we went down, and euthanasia was 174 from 2012 to 2016. Look at 2017 numbers. That intake number dropped again to 564. Euthanasia was 89, and we're looking at transfers to rescues and adoptions. All are going up. 2018, there was a little bit of an increase there in dogs coming in, but not by much. But the number of dogs euthanized was 44. So we went from 2012, right here in Syracuse, 573 dogs, to 44. Okay, so what does that mean? Like, what just happened from 2012 in 6 years to 2018? Because that's not that long a period of time, right? We know that something happened out there. It wasn't just that everybody rushed in and started adopting these dogs, mostly pit bulls, but other dogs too, of course, because you can find every type of dog in a shelter, right? But we knew something was happening, and what was working was programs, the programs in the community. I wish everybody was at the meeting we just had earlier with the new Syracuse police chief. At that table, we had about 9 or 10 represented or animal welfare organizations that are all doing their own piece of the puzzle, their own piece of the pie, I'll call it. So that in the center there, we have creating a safety net for these animals. And why those numbers started to drop is because of all of those programs happening, which include low-cost spay-neuter, healthy pet clinics, education, subsidizing the cost of already low-cost spay-neuter, which is necessary, creating a program for animal court so that we have a streamlined process here in Syracuse, so that when somebody commits a crime against an animal, one judge sees that case, 1 or 2 probation officers are also involved in that case. And the process, 1 ADA is involved in that case, the process is streamlined. So when you look at all of these things taking place, we know that that's what those numbers are, why those numbers are impacted. So I'm just going to touch on a few things of few of the things that we do at CPC. As I mentioned, political action. I loved all the things Brian was talking about with legislation, and I love legislation and political action. I get really excited because, and as Steve said, this is what works. This is what has the sustainable long-term change for animals. And you know, I think so often when I think about like Facebook and I think about our outreach when we're asking people to take action, right? So we may do a post where we offer reward money for a cruelty case, right? And we share the details of that cruelty case locally, and people are commenting and they're angry and they want to know why it's happening, right? And then we share something that says, hey, why didn't you come to a legislator meeting with us, and or something along the lines of taking action. And it's very rare that we get the response that we think we would get. Because the initial post about that animal, people were outraged and they want change, and they ask, how is this going to change? Well, it's going to change because we're meeting with these people and we're asking them to support certain bills that are going to make a difference for animals. So I can't stress that enough in terms of this piece of it. This is what's going to make the change. So here's a couple examples. Us meeting with Congressman Katko to go over, he introduced what was called the HEART Act a few years ago. He just reintroduced it again at the federal level, which does some protection for dog-fighting dogs. And then here was a local picture, excuse me, with our county sheriff, Gene Conway, who spearheaded the animal abuse registry that Q's Pit Crew supported as well. And it did pass in the local legislature. Brian mentioned this a little bit earlier. So we did lobby here really strongly for a law called Adrian's Law. Adrian was a pit bull that was found frozen to death in his shelter in December of 2017. And he had been tethered, and he was outdoors in a shelter. However, it was too cold. The shelter didn't have proper insulation, and Adrian died during the night. So we decided, you know, this was the one we were going to bring immediate attention to it, and we were going to get a co-sponsor in the Onondaga County Legislature to at least get some local legislation passed here. And we got so much support around that. And unfortunately, it didn't pass at the county legislature for a variety of reasons. And we do anticipate going back at that again. However, we got a call from one of the Syracuse Common Council members who had seen this in the media and said, okay, it didn't pass at the county level, but I bet you we can get it passed here in the city. I want to sponsor this bill. And so she did, and it passed unanimously at the Syracuse, at the city level. Excuse me. So the really cool thing, as Brian mentioned too, kind of snowballed. Somebody from Utica called at the Common Council. They wanted to pass it. Utica, it passed, and then we worked with some folks in Buffalo, and it passed there as well. Another thing we offer is exactly what Brian was just doing, which is animal lobbying events and different type of community events to get everybody engaged. We also have boots on the ground programs. This reward program, we will typically always offer a reward amount for a cruelty case where the Syracuse Police Department will usually reach out and say, hey, we don't have any leads in this case, or we may have a lead, but we really want to get in front of it by putting out reward flyers and talking to the neighbors. So that's not necessarily something the police can do, but we can do that. So we will go to the neighborhood where the animal was found, talk to neighbors, hand out information, and just really kind of create more of that awareness that this is going on. You know, and if nothing more, it kind of lets people know in the neighborhood that this is something that we take seriously. And humane education. So this is something that I love humane education because I know it works. Since 2013, we've taught over 5,000 area children. We've focused a lot in the city schools. There's a huge need for us to come in there, mostly because the teachers are saying, like, we need our kids to hear this information. They have lesson plans around what to do if you see abuse, how to appropriately interact with a dog. Our goal is to decrease dog bites from a public safety perspective, but also to to elicit a compassionate response with the dogs. And I will say we have one of our dog moms in here that comes to our humane ed programs, Ruth back there. So thank you very much for bringing your therapy dog, Miss Elsa, to the program. She's not photoed here, but she's wonderful. And so I'll explain this here in a moment. We also, as part of our humane education program, have partnered with the Hillbrook, which is the juvenile detention center here in the county. And at any given time, they have probably about 15 kids aged 12 to 18 at the juvenile detention center. And what we know is that those are the kids that need us the most. They've made some poor decisions up until that point, but we believe that interacting with a dog and learning about how to care for an animal and having an animal care for them is something that we need to do more of. So we've ran about, was it 3 or 4 6-week sessions, Ruth? About 3 or 4 sessions so far, and it's gone over really well. This is actually one of the, I just found it so powerful, one of the attendees in the class after he graduated from the program had wrote that, and it was about the parallels between himself and a shelter dog. Just extremely powerful. So, yes, Ruth.
Steph, can I just add one thing about the Hillbrook thing?
Yeah.
Taking Elsa there, Elsa's a 75-pound blue and white pit bull, and she's an absolute gem to go places with. Not because she's mine, I am that mom, but not because she's mine. But this dog handles kids that are screaming and hollering and threatening him to suicide, doing all kinds of things. She's just that dog that says, hey, come here. If you come to me, I can fix this. I can make you feel better. Stephanie has seen her work. Tara has seen her work. I mean, it's amazing to go with her, but we were at Hillbrook one day, and Elsa has a way of picking out the child that needs her the most. So she started circling this one young man. He was the cool kid in the room. There was 4 people in there. And he had his legs stretched out. You could tell he just had to be like the tough guy. He had to be the cool guy. So she circles him. She keeps circling him. And I'm like, okay, come on, come over here. And she's very obedient. But she just kept it up. And so I'm watching and I'm telling these folks, she literally will find the person that needs her the most every time. So this one lady kind of gives me a nod, like, let her go. So I'm like, okay. So all of a sudden she puts her front feet up on his leg. Now this is a tough, streetwise young man. And these children, they don't go to Hillbrook because they stole a candy bar. I mean, let's be serious. It's the next step is going to jail or going to a prison for most of them. So she puts her front feet on his leg and he's just like, it's all right. I don't care. It's all right. It's cool. I don't care. So I'm like, no, get off. And she's like, absolutely not. So the other kids are going, give her a treat, dude, give her a treat, just, give her a treat. She's really nice. He's like, no, don't want anything to do with her. Pretty soon her front feet are up here, and they're nose to nose. And I'm thinking, oh God, please don't hit my kid. Please don't swing at her. Like, I'm trying to, and he's like, no, it's okay. I'm like, okay, all right. And I just kind of step back. And I've learned to follow her lead. I mean, I'm very confident with her. So I'm watching them, and they start taking people out of the room that got to go back to their dorm or whatever they call it. And all of a sudden, when it's just 3 guards, for lack of a better term, me and a couple of the Q's Pit Crew people and this young man, I happen to look over, and this lady's like, and so I glance over, and she's got a 5-foot leash, and I just kind of give her all the room. He's on the floor with his arm wrapped around her, and there's tears in this young man's eyes. Now, this kid has probably never cried a day in his life. He is a tough street kid, but with this big pit bull spooned into him, he's literally just feeling it. And I was like, wow. And I kind of looked down and he kind of looked up and I was like, oh, he couldn't say anything. And they must have stayed that way for 5 minutes. It is remarkable.
Yeah, the
I mean,
power.
it's totally remarkable.
The power is amazing. Yeah, the power of that relationship there is what I meant. But yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to mention too here in Syracuse is that it was about 2013, the Syracuse Common Council passed a resolution called the Consolidated Animal Crimes Bill, which was a support of what Bella's Bill is. So there has been a moment here in Syracuse where on their own, working with Brian and some other advocates, have passed a resolution to support moving New York ag markets, cruelty laws out of New York ag markets into the penal code. So there's a lot of really great things happening. We have a great supportive group of people here in terms of our elected officials. We need more of them, but we'll get there. So I was asked to talk about a few cruelty cases here in the area. So I'm just going to kind of run down them and talk about charges, and if anything, this is going to just go ahead and motivate you to want to lobby for Bella's bill to pass. This case was Jack's. He had taken his last breath moments before this was taken, October of 2013, and this is one of the early cases when Syracuse police officer Cosgrave was assigned to be the first Syracuse police animal cruelty investigator on the force. This is one of the early cases. I remember the owner was found, but statute of limitations was up. So this case was horrendous and will stay in my mind forever. She was tied behind a truck and dragged down 81, and she was subsequently euthanized. And the investigating agency was not the Syracuse Police Department, even though it was in the jurisdiction. It ended up being a humane law enforcement team, and they were unable to prepare a case against this perpetrator. But what I can say is that he is now in prison on unrelated charges and will be there for a very long time. Kane was a victim of domestic violence. He was stabbed and thrown outside by the owner's boyfriend, and he traveled several blocks before he succumbed to his injuries. And this was a domestic violence case where the owner, the woman, was fearful of speaking up against the owner. So this was a difficult case because she was refusing to testify. This one was last summer, and there was this dog and other dogs that were found burnt with what they appeared to be an accelerant of some kind, and this dog had to be euthanized. Their injuries were too severe, and there was no arrest made in this case. So, I know those are difficult images to look at. I have to say I feel so lucky that this area has a dedicated Syracuse police officer that is incredibly in the know about New York ag markets and penal code and what she can do to use to prosecute or to make arrests in these cases. And as I mentioned earlier, the process is streamlined with the ADA, the judge, police officer, and follow-up and probation. So, we've got the kind of the teams there, but we need this to move. We need it to move into the penal code for that reason. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and just end with a quote of sending peace and love to animals everywhere, all of you, and the people that protect them. So I hope to continue to work with all of you in this room, and one day we won't be up here looking at those images ever again. And thank you very much. I think we have You guys coming up for a panel now? Okay.
Anybody have any questions?
Please.
I have
Heckle us,
a,
please.
Does this work? You don't have to hold it down.
I think it'll work for
Okay,
their recording.
anyway, so the first thing I need to do is contact my assemblyman and ask him to co-sponsor Bella's bill. Is that something I can do tomorrow, or is this not out in the stratosphere yet?
So, well, the bill has a number, A342. So it has been introduced. There are amendments pending. So the bill is not fully finalized yet. There's consideration still about what all might be attached to it, and we're trying to keep that to a minimum. But this is Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal's bill. So ultimately, it's up to her what finally goes into it. So yes, you can certainly make contact. And really, as Brian pointed out, making contact with your legislators is something you can do really anytime, even if you follow up later, as the bill moves and so forth. And that's what I would say would be the best thing. Introduce yourself, let them know how strongly you feel about this, let them know it's happening. And, even if the bill is not completely fully formed yet, tell them, this is something you're going to be very interested in them supporting. And yeah, absolutely. If they want to be a co-sponsor, that's great.
I think Steve's answer was spot on. And again, this is an opportunity to say, this is a bill that I'm interested in. Here's the number. And then to get the name of the staff member who you're speaking with. And honestly, if you call every couple weeks, if you just use the concepts that I was sharing earlier of just being, a respectful person, which you totally seem to be. Everyone here is, but if you are friendly to the person on the other end, you would be amazed at the reception you will get from your elected officials. They are used to being yelled at. They're used to being called no good politicians, et cetera, et cetera. And however we feel about these individuals, to use our superior communication skills, call up your assembly member and thank you for noting the A is for assembly. And you can mention that bill and say, I'm interested in maintaining a dialogue on these animal issues. This is something I'm interested in. I talk to dozens of people all the time, and there's so many of us who are interested in this. May I get your name, please, so I can share information with you and find out what your office is doing and maybe help you and help the assembly member to be stronger on these issues.
How would I help the assembly person? How would just a citizen do something?
If I was the assembly member, I would say, you live in this area of the district. I know a lot of people. What the assembly member is expecting, quite honestly, is for you to say good things about them so they get elected again. So all these people I know about, I thank you so much for taking the time. I can't wait to tell everyone who I know at work. You were so friendly and receptive, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you in a couple of weeks. And they may even say, you're in that area? Well, here's something else that's going on. And they may have another bill that's totally unrelated to animal issues. Now you've built a relationship with that office. I've seen it happen dozens of times, if not more. And that's what they love, and that's what I mean by helping.
So you think a phone call is the best initial versus an in-person visit?
A phone call to say I'd like to come in is probably best. You might just walk in and there's an intern. And the intern is just going to maybe write down some stuff. You want to think of the polar bears. You want that relationship. You want one-on-one. You want to talk with them. So I would just call up and say, hi, my name is so-and-so. Very interested in this piece of legislation. I'd like to come in because session is going on right now. You'll probably meet, again, with a staff member. Everyone has different feelings. I like to meet with the staff members. I actually, at times, I like to meet with the staff member more than I like to meet with the legislator. Because sometimes, I don't know, there's just more of an opportunity to exchange information that's a little less formal. I hope that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But you are right. You are on the right path. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I would. Oh, sure.
Well, I was just going to add to that and say that to piggyback off Brian, what I found in meeting with the legislative aides is that I can access them much easier than I could, just calling up my senator on the phone or text, or, I've gotten the cell phones of legislative aides and been able to just quickly contact them for something. And I just feel like they're much more accessible in that way. So meeting with them and being friendly with them, being friends with them is always a good thing.
Sure.
Yeah. And I would say just general thing I would add is I was thinking about Brian's slide with the handful of cash being handed over. No doubt money influences politics. We're not Pollyanna here. That is true. But we've got something, for animal issues, animal friendly, people who want protective animal laws way outnumber those who want to harm and abuse animals. And so if it weren't true that grassroots support can overcome that money difference, we would never get an animal-friendly bill passed, because the only thing we have is strength in numbers. We'll never outspend, the ag industry, the puppy mill industry, and so forth. And that's why it's so important to have the grassroots support, because we can't compete. And if it's about money, we can't compete, but we win. Emphasizing what Brian said is like we are winning. We're getting these bills passed in the face of a lot of money being spent to keep the status quo.
So I can I run a rescue. So I can go, I can talk to the other area rescues, get them to all go meet with, that's the best initial.
Absolutely.
And we urge you, where's the sign-in sheet, Steve?
Yeah,
Sorry,
right up front.
I was locked out of the building.
For yourself and others, please, if you could sign up so you can get that information. And also, like I said, with HSUS, with ALDF, I'm sure on the website has to sign up. And the point of that, again, is not to just be limited to the realm of online work. It's a tool to then take it to the next step where when you meet with your elected representative, I'm involved with the rescue. I work with dozens of rescues. I can't wait to go back and tell them about what you're doing and what your opinion is on this. So what is your opinion on this? Oh, you need more information? Let me get you more information.
Yeah. A couple other thoughts too. You're involved with the rescue. You obviously have contact with other rescues. Numbers are great, and letting your legislator know, especially if they're in their district, letting them know you have access to more numbers is important. And then doing things like Brian suggested. So they do something good. They say they'll support, sending an email to all those people and making sure that your representative knows you did that, and say, I don't know who your assembly person is, but assembly member, whatever, I had a great discussion, going to support the bill. It'd be great if you all wrote and thanked him or her. That sort of thing goes a long way. Because, the things, again, we don't have the money, but we have the numbers, which means votes. And that's what they want. Really, they want the money to get the votes. So we've got the numbers in the grassroots. And if you show them that, that's really important. And appreciation. I liked your slide about thank you. That goes a long way. Yeah.
What was the question again, sir?
How are these laws going to affect the animals that are in shelters?
How is Bella's bill going to affect the animals in shelters? Well, Bella's bill is would change the New York cruelty law, so it wouldn't directly impact animals in shelters. I don't know if there are shelter related bills currently.
You're asking an open-ended question, which is good. Let's take Bella's bill, Bella's law, for example. If our police, our judges, and our prosecutors have a better understanding of these laws, you may not have these animals languishing in shelters that Stephanie just pointed out. These laws can be addressed. We can have stronger enforcement of the laws. The challenge is, in this case, that the penal law, where most of our criminal laws are, burglary, robbery, arson, violent crimes, they're in every cop car. There's a book with the penal code. They're down at the station. You open it up. Oh, that's how you do it. The agriculture and markets law has language, some of it like 125 years old, that's very disjointed. And quite often, police agencies, many of us know, you call, let's say, not the Syracuse Police Department, which understands what their responsibilities are. You might call, county police. They're like, oh, we don't do that. Call the SPCA. Under the law, the way the law is written, your traditional law enforcement agencies must enforce these laws. Instead, it ends up in the hands of a not-for-profit, which is funded by the public, and it's good to have peace officers and humane law enforcement staff, but they're meant to kind of bolster the system. So when we pass this law, or one of the laws that I mentioned, the Companion Animal Capital Fund, which creates a budget line of $5 million to help improve conditions in animal shelters for capital projects. I was the executive director of the Ulster County SPCA south of here. You want a new HVAC system? That's a lot of money. Even the doors that come down, that for the kennels, the dogs can come in and out, those don't last forever. The dogs are always chewing on it and banging on it. It's a lot of money to replace those. So there's a law that would help animals in shelters. There are many different laws right now that help animals in shelters, and because I cover the state, if you want to email me, I'll definitely get you that information. Pardon me?
I'll have to explain it to you.
Okay, very good. Please email me. I'd like to get that information from you, sir. Thank you.
One other thing I just wanted to mention, speaking about lobbying, another advantage that we have, which is especially in these times pretty unique, is that animal protection issues are really bipartisan issues. And that's a rare thing nowadays. So if any of your, legislators, whether they're Democrat or Republican, don't make any assumptions about where they stand on these issues, because we've had a lot of champions for animal protection laws who are both liberal and conservative, Republican, Democrat. And that's a really good thing. That's a major strength of the movement. It's not like, environmental laws, for example, have largely been, wrongly, but categorized as primarily Democrat issues, and Republicans oppose them almost in a knee-jerk way. And that's unfortunate, obviously, because that's important to everybody. But animal issues are not like that. Animal issues, you can find supporters on either side of the aisle.
I have specific questions about the actual bill, and there's a couple of them. So if I get too far into the weeds, let me know and we can talk about it later. But I was wondering, there was a bill that was proposed last year in New York Senate, and that, I don't know if it has died in committee, but it was, the last time I checked, it was in committee for codes, which is the same thing where Bella's law is supposedly at, or Bella's bill is supposedly at. So I'm wondering if that is still moving ahead in the Senate, or if that has died in the Senate. And if it has, are you guys working with, it's from Senator Lanza that wrote it, are you guys working with him at all to try and do this in both houses, or are you really just looking at the assembly bill for right now?
Go ahead.
Okay. That's an excellent question. A lot of times, I'm dealing with a bill right now where there's 4 versions of the same type of bill, and that's sort of what's happened with Senator Lanza's bill. It's there, and it contains some good information, but right now we think the best bet, because do you remember earlier I was saying that each bill has to contain like the same, a Senate bill and an Assembly bill has to have the same exact language to pass? I think right now, in terms of getting the cruelty statutes out of ag and markets and into the penal code, would be A342. And Assemblymember Rosenthal is going to find a Senate sponsor for that as well. Now, you obviously are educated in the Codes Committee. The Codes Committee is a specific committee where very good things can happen, or a bill can languish and die. And that's why a lot of times these bills end up there. And I don't mean to in any way, diminish the work of the Codes Committee. It's very important. We don't want to willy-nilly pass important laws that change the codes of the state of New York. But if Bella's bill goes there and other bills go there, that is the point then to, like, laser focus. You then want to lobby, let's say, the Codes Committee, the chair of the Codes Committee, to get it out of codes. The whole idea is to get it out of committee and to a floor vote, and to urge your legislators to be a sponsor of that. So I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's getting out of the Codes Committee, but Senator Lanza's bill is very similar, but that often happens. Tethering laws, there's like 4 different tethering laws. And I don't know, I guess you just have to see which one gains momentum, and our money is on this particular bill.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good summary. Lanza just reintroduced the bill that had been introduced last year. He's kind of on his own on that right now. So as Brian said, there's no crystal ball, but it's more likely that the momentum is going to be behind A342 and its ultimate companion in the Senate, which we hope will be introduced in the near future. There's also one change in addition to the sea change in the makeup with Democrats taking firm control of both houses. There's going to be a new committee on the Senate side, an animal welfare committee. So it's very likely that committee is going to be engaged on this bill. We don't know because the bill's not introduced. Once a bill's introduced, it then gets routed to the appropriate committees. As we said, that was part of the problem with the cruelty law in the Ag and Market section. Attempts to amend it would go through the Ag Committee because of that, and then go there and die, basically. So we don't know because there isn't a companion bill in the Senate yet, and even A342 is not in its final version. So the best I would say at this point is stay tuned and, get the alerts and so forth. Because as soon as the bill starts moving, we'll be alerting, HSUS, QS, any of the groups involved. And there's a pretty big list of groups supporting the bill.
Can I add just one other thing? What's interesting is because the Democrats took majority control of the Senate, and not to condone it, but it's just the way that it is. If you are a minority member and you have a bill, your chances of really getting your bill pushed through, unless you have strong majority support, is about 0. Mm-hmm. That's just the nature of the beast. I don't feel it's right, but that's just what it is.
So do you have any ideas on why the Senate bill would have stalled in committee, I guess is what I'm asking, because you're saying that he's kind of out there on his own, but obviously he wasn't before. So is there anything that we can do differently to see that this pushes through rather than seeing it die the same fate?
The reason why the Consolidated Animal Crimes Bill, which is the precursor to this particular bill, has had difficulty, there's a number of groups that oppose it. One of the main groups in opposition is the New York State Farm Bureau. Now, the Farm Bureau is concerned that if we start to have stronger protection for animals, not just companion animals, but you know what, just to be blunt, if someone is going to attack a farm animal with a pitchfork or do the most horrible things, which I have seen in my capacity, I know ALDF has seen as well, that should be prosecuted, and that should be a crime. The Farm Bureau believes in something called the slippery slope. Are we familiar with what the slippery slope is? That we can't take a step to actually have a good tethering law, because the Farm Bureau also opposes a tethering law, that you can't tether animals outside. Because the next thing is, well, all of their cows will be tethered, and I mentioned this last time. The next thing, we will all be forced to live in a socialist vegan society. I have heard people say this to me with a straight face and expect me to give a straight answer back, which I'm not capable of doing. So that, to be honest with you, that's one of the reasons that the Farm Bureau has held it up. Another reason is there's a mindset in the Assembly, just speaking very frankly, that we have a jail state and we don't want to increase fines and penalties. Yes, we have had a generation of young men end up in prison and end up in the system for reasons which make absolutely no sense. And my personal feeling is when terms are used that this is a genocide, yes, a generation of people have been put behind bars, and it's absolutely wrong. Why is it wrong? Because it harms society. Why is it wrong? It's also wrong to allow people to abuse the most vulnerable members of our society on an equal level. So in the Codes Committee and elsewhere, there's a concern about increasing penalties. So as Steve mentioned, at the very least, if there is just a switch and these laws are put into the penal code where our cops, judges, and prosecutors have it, where they are trained in it, and just like the steps that it took for domestic violence over the past number of decades to be recognized, these aren't funny jokes in the 1970s anymore about domestic violence. Our judges, cops, and prosecutors know that this is serious. It's that kind of an investment. So one of the hurdles is also the increased penalties, because that's just the culture in the Assembly. We don't know if that is going to be the mindset and the culture in the Senate. It might be. We don't know. It's a whole new game.
And that makes for an interesting sort of anecdote about the difficulties sometimes you face when advancing legislation, because sometimes you don't even know initially where the opposition will be or what elements of a bill might trigger this or that. I was in Albany yesterday and had a series of meeting with legislators in both the Assembly and the Senate, sometimes with staffers, as Brian pointed out. But in talking about the bill, that did arise to seem like that's going to be one of the concerns. And one of the reasons why we think Bella's bill will be more successful than the past consolidated animal cruelty bills is it's got a lot less stuff attached to it. So we are trying to make this as simple as possible, a straight move, as close to a straight move from ag and markets to the penal code as we can get. And then there's a couple of other things that I think should appeal to those concerned about criminal justice reform, which are there's a provision that's in it already that will stay, that would allow judges to mandate as part of sentencing psychological counseling. So this isn't just a straight, let's throw people in jail. It's getting to the heart of the issues. And, animal crimes, unfortunately, have a really high recidivism rate. People commit animal cruelty again. So jail alone is not the answer. Somehow we have to address that. And especially with young people, that offers us at least some hope. Another big element of the bill that should appeal to people who are criminal justice reform minded is in the ag and market section, because it's not the penal code. There isn't automatically what's called a mens rea component. And those of you who are law students or lawyers know what that means. But essentially it's Latin, and it means you have to show the state of mind of someone committing a crime. So it addresses intentionality. And you can imagine, taken to an absurd conclusion, if you ran over a dog with your car and there's no mens rea component, that could be cruelty under the law, because the definition of cruelty, you cause that harm. Obviously, it matters what the state of mind is, and that sometimes, judges how severe the penalty will be. So those are two elements. The mens rea, and the intentionality thing is part of the bill. It would likely be automatic just being in the penal code anyway, but it is in the bill. Ability to add mandatory counseling as part of the sentencing is also in the bill. So that's some of the ways that we can address the concerns of those who, there's a real knee-jerk reaction amongst some. There are people, elected in the new majority that criminal justice reform is a top issue for them, and so they have almost a knee-jerk reaction to anything that would increase penalties or increase the penal code at all. So we have to educate them. That's got to be part of the conversation, and so that's why it's important. Sign up, stay tuned on the bill when its final provisions are nailed down, and there will be talking points and things. So when you're talking to legislators, there are ways you can address some of those concerns that you might hear.
I just wanted to mention too, quickly that, we're talking about some opponents that would come out against a certain bill. And recently with Adrian's Law, you never know where these opponents are going to come from. Some of them you can predict, like the Farm Bureau, and some you will be quite surprised about. And recently with Adrian's Law, we had opposition from the American Kennel Club, the AKC, that came out against any type of tethering bill. And, I think the lay person thought is that the AKC is a protection. They want to protect dogs. They love dogs, right? Because that's what they do. However, their opposition was very, very strong, and they felt as though if it's a similar slippery slope to some of the ag issues around tethering. If we start to address issues around dogs, then we're going to eventually eradicate breeding of dogs, and that's what they do, is they breed dogs, right? So it was really interesting to kind of have that come forward, and we did a lot of work. We had conversation with the AKC, and we couldn't get on the same page with them. So the legislators were some of them were certainly swayed by the AKC's opposition and their points on Adrian's Law. So just being prepared for, conversations that may take place with your legislators that says, well, the AKC supports this or opposes this, and just understanding where some of those entities stand on issues. And Karen, Jerry. Yeah.
And along those lines, and thank you all for being here. We so appreciate what you guys do. When we began to get word to activate Bella's Law, there was some information sent out that came from some SPCAs, not locally, but they were kind of arguing against having the animal crimes laws put from ag and markets into the penal code. And so we want to be able to answer these people and explain why we support Bella's Law. And one of them was that it would kind of take the bite out of SPCA's ability to do their jobs as peace officers. And I guess I wondered if someone could address that, because I would see it as supplementing what they can do. Is it really going to remove the SPCA's ability to work up front animal crimes?
With any particular bill, one of the keys, again, the polar bears, is to get stakeholders and to have dialogue and to have discussion, so we can all get the 80% glass of water that we enjoy. As far as the question, will this, under New York state law, each county is allowed to have a duly incorporated SPCA or humane society. A county can have 2, 3, 4 SPCAs or humane societies, but only one is allowed to have peace officer status. A peace officer has arrest capabilities. If properly trained, they can have a weapon and enforce laws. So when we talk about humane law personnel who work for an SPCA, animal cops who go out and can enforce these laws, those are the individuals who are employed or volunteer under the duly incorporated SPCA of the county, as per the charter of the state of New York. Peace officers are not just relegated to shelters. There's other areas, I believe, like, campus cops are peace officers as well. They can arrest individuals. So it's a legitimate concern from a constituency that says, hey, don't leave us out. Because like I said earlier, traditional law enforcement must enforce these laws. But we do want SPCAs with their expertise and their dedication specifically on helping animals and stopping animal abuse. So that is something, as Steve mentioned, as bills move along, there will be amendments. And that's one of the things that one of the stakeholders brought up that certainly is legitimate and should be included. No one is out to strip animal cops of their ability, especially from people sitting here on this panel. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. So that people who are concerned about that we can say, no, that's not going to be taken away. We're not going to take that function away. Again, it will help build on local people.
And you can say back to, my sort of 101 that I was giving before, and I know you've been at my presentations a number of times. You bring up an excellent point. I would love to advocate that point because no one wants to disempower animal cops.
Will any of the statutes be left in the ag markets, or will all of them move over to the penal code?
It would be great if they could all be moved over to the penal code, but New York state law is weird. It's like white collar crime is in a certain section. The laws are in different sections. So look, I am not a lawyer, but I do know enough that if there's a will to move these statutes into the penal code, Steve, you mentioned other states have this. So if other states are doing it in an effective way, there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't be able to do so in New York as well.
And that's, I think, too, again, that the follow-through on it, when the ASPC approved the investigation switched over to the New York City Police Department, that was done over some time and done effectively. We're used to dealing with very ineffective law enforcement or ineffective SPCAs, and so our concern is that there not be a gap where somebody's like, well, it's not my job anymore, and I don't know how to do this yet, that there not be this gap, even of the little bit of help that we have. So,
there's another bill, because all of these bills are kind of, connected in its intention. So there are other bills to increase funding for law enforcement training. And there's a group, the New York State Humane Association, which HSUS works closely with, and that's something they've been working on, and HSUS supports as well. You're very welcome.
I think we're
So
I think we're getting the hook.
We're going to go ahead and wrap up. Our panelists are still going to be around, so you can come and approach them and ask them any specific questions that you may have, or any additional information that you would like from them. If you'd like to either learn more or sign an open letter to Governor Cuomo urging him to support Bella's bill, you can either go to the ALDF website, or we have clipboards up here in the front, and you can sign the open letter that way. Again, I just want to thank all of you for coming out and, trying to be part of this coalition to further Bella's bill here in New York State. Wanted to thank our panelists for coming and sharing all your guys' information and your, passion for animals across the board. It's nice to see everyone with a common purpose. I want to tell you guys to take more food. And if you have any questions, like I said, we're going to be here. Otherwise, have a good night.